Daniel was a young man in his early 20s, working behind the counter of a busy McDonald's branch in the heart of the city. His uniform was always neat, his cap tilted just right, and though his shoes were old and worn out, he kept them polished because he believed appearances mattered. Daniel was not just another worker doing his job, he was a son, a brother, and the only hope for his family after his father passed away years ago. Life had not been easy since then. Every day he woke up before sunrise, packed his sister's lunch for school, and rushed to catch the early bus to the restaurant. The job was tiring. Customers came in non-stop, especially during the lunch rush, and Daniel often had to juggle multiple orders while listening to his manager's constant complaints. Still, he never raised his voice or frowned at anyone. He had a natural kindness about him, a way of smiling even when he was exhausted. His co-workers liked him, but they also whispered that he was too soft. They said he cared too much about people and not enough about rules. For Daniel, it wasn't about the paycheck alone, it was about treating others with respect, the same way he wished the world would treat him and his little sister. His sister, Maria, was only 15, but she was bright and ambitious. She dreamed of becoming a doctor one day. Daniel was determined to support her education, even if it meant working extra shifts, skipping meals, and saving every penny. Many nights he returned home with his stomach empty, telling Maria that he had already eaten at work, when in reality, he had given up his meal to make sure she had enough. He carried this quiet sacrifice without complaint, believing that one day it would all be worth it. One rainy evening, when the crowd was thinner than usual, Daniel noticed a man walk in. He wore a plain black jacket, a baseball cap, and jeans. At first glance, he seemed like any other customer, but there was something different about the way he carried himself. His steps were calm, his posture relaxed, and when he reached the counter, he smiled gently as though he already respected the person taking his order. Daniel greeted him politely, "Good evening, sir. What can I get for you today?" The man leaned forward slightly and replied in a soft voice, "Just a cheeseburger, fries, and a soda." Daniel tapped the order into the register, but when he glanced up again, he suddenly froze. His eyes widened as he recognized the face beneath the cap. It was Keanu Reeves. The same man who had inspired millions through his movies, the humble star who was known for living a simple life despite his fame. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He had heard stories of Keanu Reeves taking the subway, helping strangers, and living modestly when he could have lived like a king. Now here he was, standing at Daniel's counter, ordering food like any other person. For a moment, Daniel struggled to find his words. He didn't want to act like an overexcited fan, but at the same time, he felt a wave of admiration. Keanu's presence was calming, almost like he was just another ordinary man, but Daniel knew he wasn't. You're Keanu Reeves, right?" Daniel asked cautiously. Keanu chuckled softly and nodded. "Yeah, I am. But tonight I'm just a hungry guy who wants a meal." That simple response touched Daniel deeply. Here was a man admired all over the world, yet he carried himself with humility. Daniel felt an urge to show his respect in some way. As he prepared the order, he decided to do something small but meaningful. He added an extra burger and a dessert to the tray, slipping them in quietly, hoping no one would notice. When he handed the tray over, he leaned forward and whispered, "This one's on me. Thank you for being the kind of person who inspires us." Keanu looked at him with surprise, then with warmth. "You don't have to do that," he said gently. "I want to," Daniel replied with a shy smile. "It's just food, but it's my way of saying thank you." Keanu didn't argue. Instead, he nodded gratefully and said, "That's very kind of you. I appreciate it." He took the tray and walked to a corner table, eating quietly without drawing attention. Daniel watched him from behind the counter, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. He knew he had broken a rule by giving away free food, but in his heart, he felt it was the right thing to do. That night, after Keanu left, Daniel stayed behind to clean the floors. He was tired, but his heart was light. He thought about how a small act of kindness might not change the world, but it could brighten someone's day. He had no idea that this single decision would soon turn his life upside down. As he locked up and walked home under the dim streetlights, Daniel imagined telling Maria about what happened. She would never believe him when he said he served Keanu Reeves. But he decided not to tell her about the free food part. That, he thought, would remain his little secret, a gesture from one simple worker to a man who had already given so much to the world through his movies and his kindness. When he reached his small apartment, Maria was already asleep at the kitchen table with her school books open. Daniel placed a blanket over her shoulders and looked at her peaceful face. In that moment, he felt both the weight of his responsibilities and the hope that maybe, just maybe, life had something better waiting for them. The next day, however, Daniel's act of kindness would no longer be a secret. What he thought was a small gesture would soon be noticed by people who cared more about rules than humanity. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change in a way he never expected. The morning after Daniel's small act of kindness, the McDonald's branch felt no different. The usual smell of fried food filled the air, the sound of orders being shouted mixed with the chatter of customers, and the rush of workers moving quickly behind the counter kept the place alive. Daniel came in early, as always, smiling at his co-workers even though he had hardly slept the night before. He had stayed awake thinking about his meeting with Keanu Reeves. The memory of that quiet smile and the simple thank you from the famous man still warmed his heart. But while Daniel was carrying that memory like a treasure, his manager, Mr. Clark, had already been alerted to something else. The night shift supervisor had reviewed the cameras as part of their routine check and noticed Daniel adding extra food to a tray without charging for it. In the corporate world, no matter how small the item, it was counted as a loss. To the company, giving away even a burger was equal to theft. Mr. Clark was a man who valued rules more than people. He was strict, always walking around with a clipboard, looking for mistakes to write down. To him, kindness was weakness, and he often told the staff, "We don't get paid to care. We get paid to follow the rules." That morning, when he called Daniel into his small office at the back of the restaurant, Daniel thought it was for his schedule. But the moment he stepped inside, he saw the cold expression on Mr. Clark's face and realized something was wrong. "Sit down, Daniel," the manager said sharply, pointing at the chair. Daniel sat, confused but calm. "Is everything all right, sir?" Mr. Clark turned his computer screen toward Daniel. The video recording showed him slipping the extra items onto Keanu's tray. "Do you have an explanation for this?" Daniel's heart sank. He stared at the screen, knowing exactly what it showed. He tried to speak carefully. "Sir, that was a personal choice. The customer was special. I just wanted to show kindness. It was only a burger and a dessert." "A burger and a dessert?" Mr. Clark repeated, his voice rising. "That is company property. You stole from us. Do you think you have the right to give away food without paying?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I didn't mean it like that. I wasn't thinking of it as stealing. I was just trying to do something nice. The man didn't ask for it, I gave it myself." Mr. Clark leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Rules are rules, Daniel. If everyone decided to give away food whenever they felt like it, this place would go bankrupt. I can't overlook this." Daniel's palms began to sweat. He thought of Maria, her school fees, the rent, the bills waiting at home. He thought of the long nights he had spent working extra hours, the smiles he forced even when he was tired. All of it could vanish in a single decision. "Sir, please," he said softly. "I need this job. I've worked hard. I wasn't trying to cheat the company." But Mr. Clark's mind was made up. He printed out a termination letter and slid it across the desk. "You're done here. Clean out your locker and hand in your uniform." The words hit Daniel like a punch in the chest. He wanted to argue, to beg, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Mr. Clark didn't believe in second chances. With shaky hands, Daniel signed the paper, his eyes blurring with unshed tears. When he walked back into the kitchen, his co-workers stared at him. Word spread quickly Daniel had been fired. Some whispered in shock, others lowered their heads in sympathy. A friend from the Fry's station whispered, "What happened?" Daniel forced a weak smile. "It's okay. I'll be fine." But deep inside, he was breaking. As he removed his uniform and folded it neatly, he could feel the eyes of the staff on him. He didn't want to leave in anger, so he thanked them quietly, waved goodbye, and walked out the door. The familiar sound of the restaurant buzzing fryers, beeping timers, laughter of customers faded behind him, leaving him in silence. Outside, the cold wind stung his face. He stood still for a moment, clutching his small backpack, wondering what he would tell Maria. How would he explain losing his only income because of one act of kindness? His chest felt heavy, and he had to force himself to keep walking. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves was back in his hotel room, unaware of the storm that had hit Daniel's life. But fans who had spotted him at the McDonald's had already posted about the encounter on social media. Some had even written, "Keanu got free food from a worker last night. What a cool moment." That small post began spreading, and by evening, Keanu's team noticed. Curious, Keanu asked more about it. When he learned that the employee who had given him food might have been punished, he felt a wave of guilt. For Daniel, the next few days were dark. He woke up early out of habit, but instead of rushing to work, he sat at the kitchen table staring at bills he couldn't pay. He pretended to Maria that everything was fine, telling her he was just on a short break from work. He didn't want her to worry. But when she asked if he was okay, he only smiled and said, "Don't worry about me. Just focus on your studies." Still, every night when Maria was asleep, Daniel sat alone in the quiet apartment, his thoughts spinning. He remembered Keanu's kind smile, the way he said thank you, and wondered if it was foolish to have risked his job for that small moment. Yet in his heart, he didn't regret it. He had followed his nature, his belief that kindness mattered more than rules. What Daniel didn't know was that his story was no longer just his own. Strangers online were discussing it, and the man he had served that night was beginning to search for him. Something unexpected was already on its way, something that would soon change Daniel's life forever. Daniel had spent the last 3 days carrying a heavy silence inside him. He no longer had the sound of fryers and beeping timers to fill his hours. Instead, he spent most of his time wandering around the city, looking at job boards, asking at small shops, and filling out applications that he knew would take weeks to get responses. Every "we're not hiring right now" felt like a door closing in his face. The little money he had saved was already melting away, and each time he returned home, he forced a smile for Maria so she wouldn't see his worry. She had exams coming soon, and he didn't want her distracted by his struggles. On the 4th evening after losing his job, Daniel sat outside the same McDonald's branch where everything had started. He hadn't gone inside, it was too painful. He just sat on a bench nearby, staring at the glowing golden arches, remembering the countless hours he had spent behind that counter. He thought about the faces of the regular customers, his co-workers laughing between shifts, and even the smell of fries that used to cling to his clothes. It was strange how quickly something that felt like a daily routine could vanish, leaving nothing but emptiness. The streets around him were busy with people heading home, but Daniel felt invisible. He slouched on the bench, hands tucked in his jacket, staring at the ground. In his mind, questions kept circling: how will I pay rent? What about Maria's school fees? How many days before the landlord comes knocking? The weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders like a mountain. Then, the sound of a car pulling up broke his thoughts. It wasn't unusual to hear cars stop on the busy street, but this one seemed different. The engine was quiet, smooth, and when Daniel looked up, he saw a sleek black car parked just a few steps away. The back door opened slowly, and out stepped a man who made Daniel blink twice to be sure he wasn't imagining things. It was Keanu Reeves. He wore the same kind of simple clothing he had worn that night at the restaurant, nothing flashy, just jeans, a jacket, and a cap in his hand. But there was no mistaking his face. Daniel's heart skipped, and for a moment, he wondered if he was dreaming. Why would a world-famous actor be standing in front of him? Why here? Why now? Keanu walked toward him with calm steps. People passing by slowed down when they recognized him, whispering excitedly, but Keanu ignored the stares. He stopped right in front of Daniel, his eyes gentle but serious. "You're Daniel, right?" he asked. Daniel's throat felt dry. "Yes, sir," he managed to say, still in shock. Keanu smiled faintly. "I've been looking for you." Daniel blinked in disbelief. "Looking, for me?" "Yes," Keanu said softly. "I heard what happened after the night at McDonald's. I'm sorry you lost your job because of what you did for me. That wasn't fair to you." Daniel shook his head quickly. "Please, don't apologize. It wasn't your fault. I knew I was breaking the rules. I don't regret it. I just wanted to do something kind." Keanu sat down beside him on the bench, completely ignoring the small crowd that had started to gather at a distance, phones out, recording the scene. "That's exactly why I wanted to meet you again. I respect what you did. Not many people would have made that choice. I wanted to hear your story from you, not from the internet." For the first time in days, Daniel felt someone was truly listening. He told Keanu about his life, about losing his father, about taking care of Maria, about the long hours at work and the sacrifices he made to keep her in school. His voice trembled when he spoke of being fired, but he kept his eyes on the ground, embarrassed to reveal how much he was struggling. Keanu listened quietly, never interrupting, his expression filled with understanding. When Daniel finished, there was a long silence. Then Keanu said, "You've carried a lot for someone your age. And yet, even with all that weight, you chose kindness. That's something rare, Daniel." Daniel's eyes stung, and he quickly rubbed them, not wanting to cry in front of anyone. "I don't know what to do now. I've applied everywhere, but no one's calling me back. I can't let my sister down." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. His voice was steady but warm. "You won't let her down. You've already shown her what it means to be strong and selfless. But let me help you. Not because you gave me food, but because you deserve a chance to live without constantly fighting to survive." Daniel looked at him, stunned. "Help me? How?" "You'll see," Keanu replied with a small smile. "I have some ideas. But first, I want you to promise me something. Don't give up. Don't let this situation convince you that kindness was a mistake. It wasn't." Daniel nodded slowly, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time in days, he felt a spark of hope. Just having Keanu sit beside him, speaking to him as an equal, was enough to lift the heavy burden he had been carrying. The crowd watching from a distance whispered excitedly, snapping pictures, but Keanu ignored them completely. He stayed focused on Daniel, talking with him for nearly an hour about life, family, and dreams. Daniel found himself opening up in a way he never had before, because here was someone who truly seemed to understand. When Keanu finally stood up, he said, "I'll be in touch soon. You're not alone in this anymore." He handed Daniel a small card with a phone number written on it. "Call this tomorrow. My team will know what to do." Daniel held the card as though it was a lifeline. He stood up, still overwhelmed, and said, "Thank you. I don't even know how to express what this means." Keanu gave him one last reassuring smile. "Just keep being the person you are. That's enough." As Keanu returned to his car, the crowd began to buzz louder, but Daniel hardly noticed. His heart was racing, his hands trembling around the card. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The man he admired, the man he thought he would never see again, had sought him out, listened to his story, and offered him hope. That night, when Daniel walked home, his steps felt lighter. He no longer felt like the world was closing in on him. Instead, he felt as though a new door had just opened. And though he didn't know exactly what waited on the other side, he knew one thing for certain: his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. Daniel woke up the next morning with a strange feeling he had not experienced in a long time: hope. For days, his world had been filled with fear, silence, and worry, but now there was a spark inside him. The small card with the phone number that Keanu had given him rested safely on the table beside his bed. He had checked it several times during the night, afraid it might vanish like a dream. Each time he looked at it, he felt reassured that what had happened yesterday was real. Maria noticed his unusual energy while they were having breakfast. "You look different today," she said, narrowing her eyes in curiosity. "Like something good happened. Did you find a job?" Daniel smiled but didn't want to overwhelm her just yet. "Not exactly, but maybe something better than a job. I'll tell you when I'm sure." After sending Maria off to school, Daniel sat by the phone for a long time. His fingers hovered over the number, hesitation holding him back. What if it was just a polite gesture? What if no one answered? What if Keanu had only said those words out of kindness? But then he remembered Keanu's calm eyes, the sincerity in his voice, and the way he had said, "You're not alone in this anymore." That memory gave him courage. He dialed the number. A professional-sounding woman answered, "Good morning, this is the Reeves Foundation office. How may I help you?" Daniel's heart skipped. The words confirmed it was real. He introduced himself, and immediately the woman said, "Oh yes, Mr. Reeves told us to expect your call. Could you come to our office today?" Within an hour, Daniel found himself riding a bus toward a part of the city he rarely visited. The buildings were taller here, the streets cleaner, and the air filled with the sounds of busy traffic and people in suits. He felt out of place in his simple clothes, but he kept reminding himself that he belonged here because someone believed in him. When he reached the office, he was welcomed warmly. The receptionist led him to a conference room, where he waited nervously until Keanu himself walked in. He wasn't dressed like a superstar; instead, he wore a plain shirt and jeans, the same humble style as always. "Daniel," Keanu greeted with a genuine smile. "I'm glad you came." Daniel stood quickly. "Thank you for giving me this chance, sir. I didn't know if it was real until I called." Keanu chuckled softly. "I don't make empty promises. Now, let's talk about your future." They sat together, and Keanu explained that he had a foundation dedicated to helping people in difficult situations: students, families, workers, anyone who needed a hand to get back on their feet. "I've seen enough of the world to know that good people are often the ones who struggle the most," he said. "I believe you're one of those people. You've already shown who you are by your actions." Daniel listened, hardly believing this was happening. Then Keanu told him about the opportunities he could offer: a steady job working with one of the foundation's outreach programs, a scholarship for Maria's education, and temporary support for their rent and living expenses until Daniel was stable again. Daniel's mouth went dry. He stared at Keanu, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. This is too much. I can't accept all of this." "You can," Keanu replied firmly but kindly. "Because you've earned it." You didn't ask for this, you acted out of kindness. Now it's time for someone to show kindness to you. That's how the world should work. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes. He thought about all the nights he had gone hungry, all the times he had lied to Maria saying he had eaten, all the endless hours of work just to survive. And now, in a single moment, everything was changing. He lowered his head and whispered, "Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." But Keanu wasn't done. "I have another offer for you," he said, leaning forward. "I want you to join us on our outreach programs. We travel to shelters, community centers, and schools. We help provide meals, clothes, and encouragement. I think you'd be perfect for it, because you know what it feels like to struggle. You can connect with people in a way others can't." Daniel's eyes widened. He had never imagined working in something meaningful, something beyond just surviving. The idea of being able to help others the way he once needed help filled him with purpose. "I would love to do that," he said without hesitation. Keanu smiled. "Good. Then it's settled. You'll start with us next week." The news spread quickly. The same co-workers who had pitted Daniel when he was fired soon saw his name online, linked to stories about Keanu Reeves meeting a fast food worker who had shown him kindness. Some of them were shocked, others impressed, and even the strict manager, Mr. Clark, felt a sting of regret when he realized the young man he had dismissed so easily was now being recognized and uplifted. That evening, when Daniel returned home, Maria was waiting. She looked at his face and immediately guessed something big had happened. "Tell me," she demanded. Daniel laughed, tears still shining in his eyes. "Maria, your school fees are taken care of. You're going to finish your studies, no matter what. And I have a new job, something better than I ever dreamed of." Maria gasped and hugged him tightly, her small frame trembling with joy. For the first time in a long time, Daniel allowed himself to breathe deeply, free of the fear that had haunted him for years. Later that night, as he lay awake in bed, Daniel thought about how quickly life had turned. A single act of kindness, a small choice he had made at a counter, had opened doors he never imagined. He realized that sometimes, the very thing that seems like a mistake can be the key to something greater. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a worker struggling to survive. He felt like a man who had found his path. The weeks that followed felt like a new beginning for Daniel. Every morning, instead of putting on a fast food uniform, he dressed in simple but neat clothes provided by the foundation. He traveled with a small team of volunteers, and at every stop, he found himself surrounded by people who were facing struggles even greater than his own. They were families who had lost their homes, children who went to bed hungry, and workers who had been laid off with no safety net. At first, Daniel was nervous. He wondered if he was good enough to stand in front of these people, to speak to them, to offer hope. But Keanu's words echoed in his mind, "You know what it feels like to struggle. That makes you perfect for this." Slowly, Daniel began to realize how true that was. When he spoke, people listened not because he was famous or powerful, but because his words came from experience. He knew what it was like to be hungry. He knew the feeling of standing outside a workplace, jobless and uncertain. And because of that, people trusted him. One afternoon, Daniel and the team visited a community shelter where dozens of families had gathered. He stood behind a table, handing out warm meals. A little boy with wide, tired eyes approached him. The boy hesitated, almost ashamed to take the food. Daniel knelt down and smiled at him. "It's okay," he said gently. "This is for you. You deserve it." The boy took the plate slowly, his small hands trembling, and whispered, "Thank you." That single moment filled Daniel's heart. He understood then that kindness didn't have to be grand, it could be as small as a smile, a gentle word, or a warm meal. And yet, these small acts could mean everything to someone in need. Meanwhile, Maria was thriving. With the scholarship secured by the foundation, she no longer had to worry about dropping out of school. She studied harder than ever, determined to honor the chance she had been given. Whenever Daniel came home late from outreach, Maria would be waiting with her books spread out, excitedly telling him about her lessons. "I'm going to be a doctor one day, Daniel," she would say with bright eyes. "I'll help people the way you're helping them." Hearing those words made Daniel feel proud in a way he had never known. For so long, he had feared that he would fail her, but now he could see her future shining clearly ahead. News of Daniel's journey began to spread online. Journalists picked up the story of the McDonald's worker who gave Keanu Reeves free food and lost his job, only to be lifted up by the actor's kindness. People shared the story on social media, praising both Daniel's heart and Keanu's generosity. Some called it a modern fairy tale, others said it was proof that kindness still mattered in a world that often felt harsh. Daniel himself remained humble. Whenever people tried to praise him, he always said the same thing: "I didn't do anything special. I just acted the way I thought was right." But inside, he felt grateful for the journey that had brought him here. He knew how close he had come to giving up, and he silently promised himself he never would again. One day, Keanu invited Daniel to join him for a quiet dinner. The actor wanted to check in personally, to see how Daniel and Maria were doing. They sat together at a small restaurant, far from the cameras and the noise of fame. "How are you holding up?" Keanu asked with his calm smile. Daniel laughed softly. "Better than I ever imagined. Sometimes I wake up and still think it's all a dream." "It's not a dream," Keanu said firmly. "You earned this. You didn't ask for help, you gave help first. That's what makes this different. You showed kindness when no one was watching. The world needs more of that." Daniel nodded, taking those words to heart. "I just want to keep giving back. I want to make sure no one feels the way I did when I lost everything." Keanu looked at him with pride, almost like a mentor watching a student grow. "Then you're already on the right path. Remember, life will always have struggles, but you've learned the most important lesson: that kindness can change everything." As months passed, Daniel became a trusted member of the foundation's team. He led food drives, organized community events, and spoke at schools about resilience and compassion. People admired him not for fame or wealth, but for his sincerity. He became a role model in his community, someone who proved that even in the darkest times, a single act of kindness could light the way forward. Maria, inspired by her brother and by Keanu's support, pushed herself harder in her studies. She earned top grades, and her teachers began to speak of her as a future leader. Every time Daniel saw her progress, he felt that all his sacrifices had been worth it. Even years later, Daniel often thought back to that rainy night when Keanu had walked into his McDonald's branch. At the time, it had seemed like an ordinary shift, just another customer ordering food. But that simple meeting had changed everything. Sometimes, when Daniel shared his story with new volunteers, they asked him if he regretted giving away that extra burger and dessert. He always smiled and said, "How could I regret the decision that changed my life? That one small choice opened doors I never even knew existed." The story of Daniel and Keanu continued to inspire people far beyond their city. It was shared in articles, speeches, and classrooms as an example of kindness, humility, and the power of doing the right thing even when it costs you something. And every time Daniel saw someone smile because of the work he was doing, he silently thanked the moment that had set it all in motion. For Daniel, life was no longer about survival. It was about giving, sharing, and building a legacy of compassion. He knew that his father would have been proud, that Maria would carry the lessons forward, and that the kindness he had once given quietly across a McDonald's counter had turned into something much greater. And in his heart, Daniel believed something he would carry for the rest of his life: when you act with kindness, the universe has a way of returning it to you in ways more stunning than you can ever imagine.